Welcome to the Sales SOS podcast, where we answer your sales distress calls. I'm your host, Liz Hyman, bringing the rescue boat to your sales challenges. In this ever-changing sales environment, it's easy for leaders to feel adrift. We're here to be the beacon guiding you to success. Each episode, I'm joined by top sales experts and practitioners who have navigated this waters and come out victorious. Together, we'll uncover the insights and strategies that will help you hit your sales targets and grow your business. So if you're ready to turn your sales distress into sales success, you're in the right place. Let's dive into today's topic. Hey, welcome to the Sales SOS podcast. This is Liz Hyman, and we have your Sales SOS crew here. We have Bryn Tillman and Chris Bowen and Renee, who stepped out for a moment, Renee Bigelow, and Daryl Pearl. There's Renee. And we are going to talk about what do companies do when they start getting desperate. It's Q4. We're desperate. We have to hit these numbers. What are the mistakes that they make, or what are the decisions they make that seem like good decisions, but maybe they're not good decisions, or maybe they're short-term decisions, but they're not long-term decisions. So I know, Chris, you had some you wanted to share, so I'm going to let you start this segment. What are the mistakes?
There's obviously lots of things that you can do wrong, right? I think one of the bigger ones is thinking that you're going to discount your way to hitting your number, right?
Wait.
I'm not saying there aren't times when
Say
that
why that's not a good idea, Chris. It's obvious to us, but why is that not a good idea?
You set the expectation that this is what your price really is, right? But you're also not understanding your client's business. Like, there's a reason why these things are delayed. It's typically not going to be budgets what the delay is. It's something in their business cycle. It's something in the uncertainty, as we were talking about in the previous episode. There's something else going on. You need to understand what's causing your deal to be essentially either below the line or maybe straddling that line between what's going to get funded and what's not. And if you can understand that, then you can position yourself to be in a better position. Doesn't mean that maybe then you don't discount some, because maybe it really is a legitimate budget concern. You can figure out a way. Maybe they go for a longer term contract. There's lots of different levers that you can push there in order to try to pull that thing in and make sure that both sides are getting something. I think if you give a discount without anything else, I always think that's bad practice, right? Your sales leaders should not be looking for saying, let's just discount right up front and nothing else coming back on our side, whether that's referenceability, whether that is other types of terms that you want to put in there.
I'll add to that. I do think it's important, though, to try and pump up the team, right? Like, it's tough on the team. So incentivizing, instead of discounting, like incentivizing your team and doing more team building kind of, I'm blanking on a word right here. Sorry about that. But the idea of like keeping everybody pumped while they have this pressure on them to close fourth quarter, right? It can be fun little weekly sessions. It can be incentives. It can be whatever that makes it a little more fun during a high pressure time, I think is really, really important. I know I'm always bringing in a culture aspect to this, but I think it's really, Bren put gamification in the chat. Exactly. Like add something to it to take some of this heavy pressure off.
I want to go back to this.
Well, if you're going to have a spiff, like if you're going to have a spiff, make sure that it's something that people look at and say it might be challenging, but it's doable, right? The thing that will demoralize your team is, we're going to have a spiff, but really we're not expecting to pay any of that out, right? Because we think it's nearly impossible. It's like nobody's going to get motivated by that. Get something in there that's going to really, it drives what you want them talking about, but also drives the
and meaningful too, right? Like don't dangle something that's like a baby carrot, right? Like,
right.
Well, you could say for each of these little things that happen, you get a little thing.
Yeah. So not a big thing. Exactly. Yeah. Like,
I want to go back though.
It's actually fun.
Yeah. Right.
I got 5.
Okay, wait 1 second. I want to go back to discounting and talk a little bit about why this is problematic. One is, I had a client years ago that said hospitals always wait until the end of the year to get their year-end discounts. And I said, no, hospitals wait for your year end to get their year end discount.
Yes.
You have trained them to get the year end discount. Now, the other thing is you're robbing Peter to pay Paul, right? I give you discount to get this closed now when I could have made $3,000, $5,000, $10,000, $100,000 more if I had waited till January. So we're making the investors happy, but they're going to be unhappy next year because we started the year by stealing, robbing Peter to pay Paul. Anyway, all right, go, Daryl. Give us 5.
All right, so things people will do in Q4 that they shouldn't do. Okay, here we go. Number 1, management just being on the reps to dial more, dial. And the issue with that is you should instead be going deep on your current opportunities, because even if you dial and even if you uncover that 1% that might have interest, the chances of them closing in the next 3 months from a complete cold call, highly unlikely. So you're actually losing opportunity. Number 2, calling non-marketing qualified leads like event attendees who picked up your tchotchke on the hope and the prayer that they're going to suddenly become a multi-million-dollar deal. It's a waste of time. Number 3, I had discounting as well, but from a different point of view. Throwing out the discount hard, but you haven't actually qualified the pain and the consequences of no decision. So if they haven't bought in on the consequences, it doesn't mean your lower price is going to change behavior. That's number 1. Further, though, if you do discount, you're left with the same problem of likely still missing your number, because you had an original number that was this big, you discounted it by 25%, you still have to make up that 25% because that was in the original forecast to get you across the finish line. So either way, it's not working for you. Number 4, getting a verbal yes from your champion, but actually not pursuing the paperwork. And then you go and tell management that you've got this deal, and then they chase you for the next 3 months to say, where's the paperwork? And then ultimately it falls through. Follow the process. And number 5, management starting to more and more take control and micromanage because they're panicking, which disincentivizes the reps. And ultimately what causes that to happen is they miss this number and then they leave you and you're screwed for the next quarter and beyond. That's what I see over and over again.
Mic drop. That was brilliant. So yeah, these are the problem is they all sound like in the moment, they sound like the right thing to do, right? Let's do something. Let's dial. Let's keep dialing. And if you even just start doing the math, if you do 100 dials and you get one conversation, the chances of that one conversation turning into a closed deal, unless you have a super short sales cycle, if you have a 1 or 2 or 3 day sales cycle or a week-long sales cycle, dial like crazy. Keep dialing. But if you've got a business to business complex sale with a long sales cycle, dialing's not going to help. And I totally agree with the trade show. Most of the things that come out of trade shows are trash. But what about all those people that weren't trash, that actually had conversations with you and were interested, but they weren't interested in that moment? So you put them in the bottom of the heap and forgot about them. Go back to those that had meaningful conversations.
Especially those people you already have a business relationship with, that you had a conversation with at a trade show. It just happened to be at the beginning of the year and you really have it, you kind of set it down because you were chasing new business, right? Like those kind of scenarios. I'll add one more to Daryl's list that I think sometimes gets undercounted or underweighted. And that is really, if you're going to micromanage, be the best defensive blocker for your salespeople that you can. And that is like, I guess I feel this one acutely because I spend a lot of fourth quarter in a lot of strategic meetings for the next year, right? Like, what are we planning? What are we doing? We're really planning for things that we know are problems and we're working on those things. Don't trap the people who can make the cash register ring right now in a lot of those meetings. Be very choosy about their time and how you commit them to things when you need them to be closing in fourth quarter. And it's a delicate balance because sometimes you really need their input, but you have to be the best defensive blocker for that.
Yeah. So you need to do strategy. Strategy is important. You don't want to wait till the beginning of the year to do your strategies. So when do you do it? And my feeling is like the very, very beginning of Q4, The first week of October is a great time to do training because you have the whole, or to do the planning. But don't wait. Don't wait until, you're end of November and early December and they're really scrambling.
More importantly, like to make sure you space it out, that you aren't waiting too much on like your top seller, right? That you aren't trapping them too much. Like really kind of having a good global overview of that.
What other mistakes? I want to share, actually, before I ask for other mistakes, we talked about going in and then dropping a big discount. And I want to give some examples of how these things backfire. So a sales rep that I was working with was working on a multi-million-dollar deal. And it was with one of the big enterprise companies. And they had worked, it was a highly technical deal. They had worked on the pricing, got it all set up. Everything was going, but it wasn't going to close until the following quarter. And they needed the numbers for this quarter. And he had a really young, excitable sales manager who probably, I don't know. Anyway, he got this idea to call this sales rep's contact and say, hey, we'll give you a 25% discount if you close it right now. And that head of technology, that CTO said, oh, I was told that I had the best price we could possibly get. Now I need to go back to my board and start this conversation over. So he just undermined his salesperson's credibility, undermined his company's credibility, and he pushed back the sale. Don't assume that you know more than your sales reps and that you're going to get in there and somehow make something happen that your sales reps can't. I've got another head of sales, hang on one second, Brent, that constantly would jump in when he got anxious and close his salespeople's deals. So they never really learned to close them, totally undermine their credibility. Like if you want your salespeople successful, don't undermine them, especially in these urgent crisis times. Go ahead, Brent.
Yeah. When we talk about giving a discount, it's about us making a sale, not us solving a problem.
Right.
And they know this, right? And to your point, it feels so inauthentic. They are never, ever going to trust you moving forward in whatever you say around pricing. So, the bottom line is, we can do more for you. We can offer additional things. Or we share an ROI of why, if you do it this quarter and we get started now, it will make a bigger impact. But the moment we make it about price when they have not asked is the moment it's very clear it's about me making a commission and me hitting my numbers, not about me solving your problem.
And let me jump in.
Sorry, Daryl.
As a buyer, we're not stupid. I've bought so much software in my time frame, it's scary because we talk to each other, whether it's online, on social, and communities like Pavilion and others. We all know what each other got as a price. So we know what your bottom line is. And we also know exactly the point that was made earlier, that if it's your end of quarter, which is, I use the your end of quarter thing, the vendor's end of quarter thing all the time to get a better price. And they would always threaten me. A rep, don't do this. Don't threaten and say, this is a one day only price. If you went there once, you will go there again. And I know that. The only time that ever backfired on me, and I actually escalated from the rep to the VP, and both came back and said, nope, that was an offer, a month ago, not now. And I said, okay. And I went on LinkedIn and I found out who the chief revenue officer was, connected with him, said, I'm a prospective buyer. He connected quickly. And then I messaged him and said, I'm ready to sign today at this price that your team gave me last month. And neither my rep nor your VP will do this. I'm guessing if you're like me, you need every dollar on your end of quarter. And in that case, they got back to me in 20 minutes and they were on a trade show floor speaking. And they said, give me 5 minutes. He came back 5 minutes later and he said, the price is yours if you can sign today. That's the thing. Buyers aren't dumb. So stop thinking they are. Stop playing the games. Because when you play those games, all you're doing is pushing us away and make us want to go buy from the competition, especially when two products are both relatively capable as whoever gives the best customer service combined with the best price.
There was a thing I believe actually I'm 98% certain, in Todd Capone's in the transparency cell when he was talking about, here are the things that are important to our company, right? So not trying to hide it as, hey, I'm carrying about you. These are the things that are important to us. They were the length of the deal, the timing of the deal, the components that were included, and one other factor, right? These are the things that we understand that are important to you, right? And they may not be those exact same things. And saying, this is where we believe that the negotiation really has to take place. And if we're going to give in one area, we've got to make it up in some of these others that are important to us. But we are willing to do that. So, I think sometimes having that type of conversation, if you know those things, can help. The other part that you have to really be careful of, especially as you're moving, if you're in a more senior position like a CRO or something along those lines, is when you're discounting, well, now what does that do from a bottom line perspective? Because a lot of times we get really, really focused on the top line from a seller's perspective. But what's that doing from a bottom line perspective? And now are you going to be in more challenging conversations with your board or with your CFO because of the amount of discounting or something along those lines if you get too carried away with it? So you have to really pay attention to those things.
So the one other thing that I want to touch on, you guys, is investors. And we talk about investors a lot. We don't have Mike here. He's watching his son swim meet. I think it's USC in Hawaii. Anyway.
Tough life.
The investors start getting anxious. Like, we've got to get our numbers up for the investors. We've got to get our number up for the board. And so we're going to do whatever it takes to hit the number. And if you're if you're on the stock exchange, of course, not hitting your Q4 number is, can really impact the price of stock. So there's this investor factor. How do you deal with that? I mean, I don't know if there's an answer to that, but I'm throwing it out there because I know that some of the company folks that are listening to me, some of the CEOs, some of the COOs, they're going, yeah, but our investors are like, I don't care what it takes, hit your number.
Yeah, I mean, I think part of it is you have to be able to understand what number, right? Because different people are going to be looking at different things, right? So if they're looking at your top line, only the revenue number, are they looking at what you're pulling through from a profitability or margin perspective? Are they looking at those numbers? Are they looking at what your expense trends are? I mean, there's a lot of factors that go into those overall evaluations. I think you have to be able to understand what they're looking for. And to be honest, you need to be able to have real conversations with them around what it's going to take in order to get to what their expectations are. I'm not saying those conversations are comfortable, because most of the time they're not, but you need to be able to have that type of conversation.
I'll add on that, Chris. I think it's really important, and oftentimes your marketing team can help with this piece of it. It's really important to understand the market too, right? Like, what are some things that are happening in the market? Are there acquisitions going on, mergers and acquisitions going on? Are budgets being cut across the board with some of your biggest customers? Like, is this a temporary thing? Is this a cycle? Is it cyclical? Is it a trend you see ongoing? Like, you really need to be able to explain the numbers behind the numbers, especially if you see it as a blip, right? Like Bryn mentioned earlier, that a lot of people are kind of waiting to see results of elections or some other things happening in the war that kind of just have them indecisive. But they feel like, but there's a feeling that they will make a decision because they're going to have to. They're just kind of waiting to get a little bit more information. So if you feel like there's something like that that's kind of holding things up, you need to have that story. And marketing teams are often very helpful at getting research, at accumulating and analyzing the market for you to have that story as a sales leader to match to what you're seeing and getting empirically from your sales reps as well.
In my experience, big thing to think about with investors, and I see this fail often, is a couple things. When you have founder mode, and the founder is promising literally everything to the investors because they don't know how to manage the investors, eventually the day comes when they have to face reality and say, that number I told you we're going to make back in January, we're not going to make it because I overpromised and I couldn't deliver. So the CEO and the revenue leaders, head of sales, head of marketing, need to have a very honest, transparent relationship with the investors. If it's just top line, then they need to understand that means likely your net recurring revenue is going to suck in subsequent years because you're going to have so much attrition. Are they okay with that? If you're public, they're not going to be okay with that. If it's margin, then we can maybe do some belt tightening and cost reductions to increase the margin, even though we're not going to hit the top line number, and they may be okay with that. But part of it is truly to have that ongoing conversation. What I see happen too often is the CEO wants to own that relationship, shuts everybody else out, makes promises to keep the pressure off of them, pushes down hard on their own team, which then results in high churn in the actual staffing because nobody can handle that pressure. And ultimately, the CEO gets fired. That's why the executive leadership, the head of sales, the head of marketing, need to have their own relationships with those investors, those board members, not just the CEO. So sometimes you have those back channel conversations to manage expectations, but that's the reality. And I'll flip it around. Investors need to do the same thing. Investors cannot have happy ears and just listen to what the CEOs tell them. Investors need to proactively initiate those relationships and build them with the head of sales and the head of marketing and the head of customer service. Huge impact on that NRR number. So if you don't have that at the top, then it's dysfunctional from the get-go. And I would say, don't take the job offer when it comes. Run as far as you can go.
And I think this is huge because founders and investors are in this constant battle, right? So if you have venture capital and they're really looking at 2 to 3 years, 5 years, flipping it, what can we do? And they've got their eye on certain numbers because that's how they're measuring their success. As a founder, you need to understand that. And I think this is a whole nother conversation I have often is, as a founder, what does that investment mean? And how do you manage that relationship? Because the expectations are high because they're giving you money because they want a return on investment. And so this is a struggle. But it doesn't necessarily mean the right thing to do is to, have a trunk sale and sell everything in your trunk so you got nothing left.
Everything. That's the answer.
Move it all. Okay. So unless there's any last comments, shall we wrap up this segment and talk about, so we're going to wrap up this episode on what mistakes the companies make during Q4 when they're scrambling to hit those numbers. And we're going to dive into our next episode in a minute and talk about what you can do to not end up in that situation where you're having that Q4 scramble. So thanks for joining us for the Sales SOS podcast. We'll see you in our next episode. And that's a wrap of this episode of the Sales SOS podcast. A huge thank you to our experts for throwing us a lifeline with their insights. We hope today's episode has equipped you to navigate the sales seas with confidence. Never miss an episode. Subscribe to the Sales SOS podcast on your favorite platform. If you have questions, comments, or topics you'd like us to explore, join us live on LinkedIn every second Friday or share your questions on YouTube or LinkedIn. Until next time, keep sailing towards those sales goals. I'm Liz Hyman, your captain here at the Sales SOS podcast, saying smooth sailing and successful selling.